Trump now can fire these people, begin that process while they're appealing. It currently was stayed. Trump couldn't act until the appeals were resolved. Now he can. But these people were monstrous to us in our government, at the State Department, at education, all the bureaucrats. And they got fat and rich off that time off, and the rest of us had to have police come to local businesses and knock on their doors. It was really offensive.
And to those that have been riffed, to those that have been fired today, I just want to say I'm sorry, and you have deserved better than this.
No. Victory in the Supreme Court yet again. You see, this is the case where they sued the Department of Education, and they said, who do you think you are? You think you're running this department? No, we are. I am, in fact. And the judge who's running it was this guy, remember? Myong-Jeon, who came in from Seoul, South Korea. Born over there, came in, and Joe Biden appointed him in 2023. And then he just decided, I'm the president now, and so eat it. Trump said, we're going to start firing people. He said, no, you're not. Trump took this up to the Supreme Court, and boom, the Supreme Court came back down in a victory. Showing here, 6 judges versus the 3. Very short decision from the Supreme Court. We'll take a look at Judge Sotomayor's response and her dissent and what she's so upset about, but you'll notice they didn't let Jackson write this one. So Sotomayor is upset about it, and really why they're upset is the same reason they're always upset, is because this is going to result in a firing of a bunch of people, 1,300 give or take, over from the Department of Education is what some reports say. And this now is lifting Myong-Jeon's limitation on Trump's order. Remember, Trump came out, signed an order. We're going to make some changes here. He said, no, you can't. Anybody who's fired, you have to come back, bring them back. I'm in charge. So now the Supreme Court came back down and they wrote the following. All right. Trump's DOJ applied for a stay to us, to the Supreme Court, and it was presented to Justice Ketanji, and she gave it to the court. Now, they come back down, not a lot of rationale from them. They say that the May 2025 preliminary injunction issued by Judge Myong from South Korea is now stayed pending the disposition of the appeal, right? So Trump now can fire these people, begin that process while they're appealing. It currently was stayed. Trump couldn't act until the appeals were resolved. Now he can. So that means the Supreme Court is likely going to be inclined to find in their favor, even if the lower level court of appeals finds against Trump, right? They're saying, actually, looking like on balance here, we should be deferring to the executive branch, as has always been the case up until Trump came around and the entire judiciary got weaponized. So they write, should cert be denied, right? In other words, we're going to keep the status quo until this comes back up to us. If the Court of Appeals deals with it appropriately and we're happy, we'll leave it alone. If they don't, we'll deal with it when somebody else appeals based on their ruling. And that's the game. So a big victory for Trump. And of course, that means they can actually, do what they were elected to do, which is to run the executive branch, which is a new and novel concept for the Democratic Party, apparently. But what we see also is that Sotomayor is dissenting. And she's saying, this is going to be a disaster. Says this case arises out of Trump's unilateral efforts to eliminate a cabinet-level agency established by Congress nearly half a century ago. And they always do that, right? It's just kind of like a linguistic mechanism. Half a century ago, 3 decades ago, 100 years ago, abortion's been allowed for 65 years. Remember all that? It's always that. Okay, relax. Half a century? Great. You mean this country existed for 200 years without that? Without the Department of Education? So it's just a platitude. It really means nothing. So you can just kind of delete it, as this judge should do. Now, as Congress mandated, the department plays a vital role in the nation's education system. We have some of the dumbest people on the planet, safeguarding equal access to learning and channeling billions of dollars to school and students across the country. It doesn't go to students. That's the problem. It goes to the teachers unions and to the Democrats and to the trans organizations. Now, only Congress has the power to abolish that department, says Sotomayor. And when the executive publicly announces its intent to break the law, which they didn't, and then executes on that promise, it is the judiciary's duty to check that lawlessness and not to expedite it. She says 2 lower courts, like the judge from South Korea, preliminarily enjoin the mass firings while the litigation remains ongoing, right? And so their backdrop is always, we should defer to the status quo to preserve the government bureaucracy and not let Trump actually govern. Now, that decision is indefensible, they said. Trump is now going to be lifting this injunction, this court, and he's going to be dismantling the entire department. And what that means is Trump has the power to repeal statutes, and he can fire all those necessary to carry this out. And so I am unable to join this use of our emergency docket, and Sotomayor is going to continue to cry. The directive offered competing explanations. We don't really know why these people are being fired. And the reason for that silence has become apparent because this is going to be a total shutdown. And McMahon has been asked a lot about this. And internal developments leading up to this, when they came in, they were told to start preparing lists of people. And then Trump formalized the order. So she's taking us on a little bit of a history lesson. lesson. And here you go. Dozens of affidavits from people saying we're going to die. Even short-term delays in funding can force school districts to make cuts and to staff and programs and disrupting services for students and families and teachers unions and the Democratic Party. Scores of officials who worked for the department also attested that the agency would no longer be able to carry out many of its duties, and they're all going to die. So Sotomayor is going to say a preliminary injunction is meant to prevent that from happening, and Trump doesn't have authority to close a cabinet-level agency. But what has happened is they're doing that, and that McMahon is exceeding her powers, and so this court shouldn't be doing that. Now, the mass terminations has already resulted in harms, saying the state plaintiffs submitted affidavits about some technical college in Washington State, for instance, that did not receive recertification in time, and others admitting students for financial aid it's going to cost colleges lost funds. Now, that showing is sufficient for this lawsuit to proceed, and so we should defer to the status quo, saying the government is not persuasive, and so Sotomayor is going to respectfully dissent. But meanwhile, got a bunch of firings that are about to come down the pike. You saw 1,300 workers looking like they might be shown the door, and that happened recently. In fact, Reuters just explained to us the State Department elsewhere, this is not the State Department, this is the Department of Education, but the State Department in the building next door, they began firing more than 1,350. I was almost going to say 1,300, but I didn't want to forget those extra 50 people. U.S.-based employees gone as the Trump administration proceeded with an unprecedented overhaul of its diplomatic corps. And here's a video of these civil servants losing their jobs. Oh no, get your popcorn and watch them as they have to go through what they tried to impose on all of us. Remember during the lockdowns, and remember during the non-essential, remember when many of us were deemed non-essential? Of course we were lawyers, so we're like essential, but everyone else is not essential. Remember that crap? And they sat around and they're like, if you don't take the jab, you should go to prison. There was a sizable, maybe plurality of Democrats who thought that. And maybe not prison, but a big, I think even majority of Democrats thought you should be fined or you should be denied medical care, medical treatment. Remember all that? Remember the viciousness from these people? So when I start to say, you don't want to take any joy in someone's suffering, schadenfreude is not a very nice thing to indulge in too often, even though we do. But these people were monstrous to us in our government, at the State Department, at education, all the bureaucrats. And they got fat and rich off that time off, and the rest of us had to have police come to local businesses and knock on their doors. It was really offensive. So they can go find other private sector jobs. They've been deemed to be non-essential, but I think they're going to have a hard time getting a new job because this is how they look and act. Get out of the road, idiots! It's a crosswalk. Gosh, they got nice shirts together.
Sabotage, pulling people back from the front lines when we really need them the most. Now that we have the tensions in the Middle East, ascendant China, and aggressive Russia, what are we doing pulling back the people who know how to deal with these tensions in the world?
And to those that have been riffed, to those that have been fired today, I just want to say I'm sorry. And you have deserved better than this.
No.
I think every single person, when you leave this building, you walk through out those doors.
Did he just say feds matter?
For the final time, you should do it with honor and dignity. You should not do it out of humiliation and of this type of weaponization of politics. You deserve better.
Okay, you see why they were fired. They had to go. Listen to them. We need more testosterone in the State Department. That was clearly not enough. So we're happy to see that there were some changes there. The Supreme Court has cleared the road for future firings in a 6-3 decision. Sotomayor and the libs very unhappy about it. But just think of it, guys, don't worry about it if you're on the left. Just think of it as non-essential. It's not that big of a deal. It's just temporary. It's 2 weeks for you to go find a new job. You're fine. You'll find a new job in 2 weeks. Trump's economy's booming. So go get a real job and we'll see you on the other side.